Several years have passed since we last took on the biggest and the baddest battles in Star Trek, and to say that we've not been stuck for content since kind of undersells it a little bit. The new streaming era of Star Trek came out firing, and I mean that quite literally. There were several omissions from this first list that had a lot of people going, have you even watched Star Trek at all? You gotta save some stuff for the sequel, don't you? Let me just put down the criteria that I've used putting together this list. So for example, the great battles are not necessarily the ones where the good guys come out on top. Already I can start to hear the cogs turning in people's minds going, ooh, what's the possibilities for this one then? Second, a battle does not have to be shown in its entirety to qualify for this list. Now I know the first thing that comes to mind is like, oh, so Wolf 359 then. Not on this list. There's always a coveted spot on list 3. You'll see what I mean as the list goes on. Now with that, let's arm photon torpedoes, let's charge those phasers. I'm Sean Ferrick for TrekCulture, and here are 10 more greatest battles in Star Trek. Number 10, the Enterprise versus the Narada. Star Trek 2009, as we've come to call it in shorthand, is directly responsible for reinvigorating the franchise, which had, at that time, gone a wee bit stale after the cancellation of Star Trek Enterprise. Between 2005 and 2009, J.J. Abrams came along and had this vision for a Star Trek that would be both honouring what came before and updating it to make it more accessible for a modern audience. The first of these films brought us a new Enterprise, a new crew, and new Romulans. Nero took his ship into the past and into the nightmares of many Starfleet officers. Though he vastly outgunned much of Starfleet of the day, he did not stand unopposed. During the climactic fight with Spock, Nero orders a full barrage of torpedoes to be fired at the far smaller ship, then arriving accompanied by a musical score that still has the hairs on the back of my neck standing to attention. The Enterprise warps in, destroys those torpedoes, and turns its attention on firing on the far larger ship. A combination of phasers, torpedoes, and a very useful MacGuffin in the shape of red matter finally brings the Romulan ship to its knees. It was a brief battle, but it did prove to be one of the best ones we had ever seen on screen. Number 9, I Will Burn Your Heart in a Fire. The finale of Star Trek Lower Decks' third season, The Stars at Night, sees a small armada of Texas-class ships powered entirely by AI turn against Starfleet and start firing at anything and everything in their path. A very timely reminder that self-flying ships are not quite ready yet. This nevertheless shocked audiences who weren't quite expecting the level of destruction they were about to see. First, and perhaps fittingly, Admiral Buenamigo falls victim to these ships. He was the one who spearheaded the AI campaign to power these ships, and therefore is probably the one most directly responsible for what happened after. Once he has been killed, the Texas-class ships then turn their attention and begin firing on Douglas Station. This was the first time that we had seen a battle with a space dock type structure. Though the Sovereign-class USS Van Citters swoops in to save the day, it too is quickly outmatched. The Cerritos does manage to lure these ships away, and it looks like it might be curtains for the Second Contact special until, at the last minute, the entire array of California-class ships arrive to back it up. It was a seriously fist-pumping moment pulling double duty. 1, they save the Cerritos, and 2, they cement and prove that the California-class may not be sleek like the Sovereign-class, but they are completely dependable. Number 8. The Odysseys Sacrifice. The USS Odyssey arrived for its final mission at DS9, totally unprepared for what was about to happen in the Gamma Quadrant. There was a deliberate intention behind using a Galaxy-class ship in the Jem'Hadar, the same intention that had gone into putting the broken hull of a Constitution-class ship in the Best of Both Worlds Part 2. It was to make sure the audience knew that even if our heroes had been present, there really was nothing that they could have done to change the outcome. This battle was great in that its after effects were being felt years later, tens of thousands of light years apart. The destruction of the Odyssey introduced us, in reality, to this great new threat on the Gamma Quadrant, but also it served as another mission statement that Star Trek Deep Space Nine, which was the first Star Trek produced after the death of Gene Roddenberry, was a new, darker take on the final frontier. The brutality of the fight is shocking to see. From that opening volley, we can see that the Odyssey is hopelessly outmatched. Then, even as they turn to flee, and the Jem'Hadar having none of it, well, we all know how that ended. It was a dark day for Starfleet and the Alpha Quadrant. Number 7. The Living Construct takes over. Airing on both Paramount Plus and Nickelodeon initially, Star Trek Prodigy earned the label Kids Show, but it's battles like this that prove that that's not an accurate label at all. Though it's certainly true to say that it was kid-friendly, seeing beloved Starfleet ships infected by and then crippled by a destructive virus was not exactly the family-friendly Star Trek we were expecting to see. The first part of the finale, Supernova, sees the Living Construct, a virus designed by the Diviner, finally activated and begin to spread. This long-dreaded plot device threatened to destroy Starfleet, and for a short time at least, it looks as though it might actually do it. As it begins to infect the Starfleet Armada, they begin firing on each other. You kind of forget sometimes just how much damage phasers can actually do. It was heartbreaking to see some of our favourite ships crippled in such a brutal way. And there were familiar names on these ships: Thunderchild, Sovereign, Centaur, Defiant. Inside, some of those crews were certainly being burned to death as phasers sliced through the hull. Yay, kids? Number 6. The Enterprise D's Trench Run. Starfleet Picard brought its third season to a close with a dazzling array of effects. Picard, the Enterprise D, and the Borg Queen all go up against each other. While Picard, Riker, and Worf search the cube for Jack Crusher, the crew back on board the beautifully rebuilt Enterprise D bridge deal with enemy fire from the cube itself. And in this scene, Beverly Crusher and Data both really get to shine. In a scene that knowingly references Star Wars Episode 4 A New Hope, Data takes the Enterprise D inside the cube, flying between turrets and weapons fire in a way that no human pilot would ever be able to. As the new Golem's furiously fast fingers plot the course, you've got Dr. Beverly Crusher arming and firing torpedoes and phasers. Her post-Nemesis career had inspired her to pick up some new tricks, and never before had we seen the Enterprise D so nimble nor ferocious as it carves its way through the cube. With nothing to stand against it by the time it gets to the center, it fires the kill shot and stops just long enough to rescue our beloved crew members before flying out of there, which, according to some corners of the internet, was all done to the soundtrack of the Beach Boys. Number 5. Aati Prime. Star Trek Enterprise's third season introduced us to the Xindi, and finally showed us an alien race that didn't all look exactly the same all over the planet. We had the primates, the arboreals, we had the aquatics, the insectoids, and the reptilians, all coming together with the warm and fuzzy intention of wiping out humanity. By the time of Aati Prime, it really did look like Enterprise's time was up. The arc that kicked off this entire experience was, of course, the Xindi attack on Earth, an attack that saw 7 million people killed. This then inspired the mission into the Delphic Expanse, where the Starfleet ship went not just to prevent a war, but also more than a few crew members went looking for revenge. Little do they know, they would be hopelessly outgunned. By the closing moments of Aati Prime, a Xindi task force take on Enterprise. As they begin carving into the hull, we see crew members blasted out into space, and also T'Pol with hopelessness written all over her face. We were right there with her. Yeah! Now, this is Star Trek after all, so it wasn't entirely hopeless, but this was very much Enterprise's third season not coming to play. Number 4. The Massacre at the Omarian Nebula. Star Trek Deep Space Nine took a bold new approach to storytelling when it debuted in the 90s. First, it concentrated on the efforts to rebuild Bajor, a planet that had been plundered by the Cardassians during the occupation. As the show went on, it focused on religion, race relations, and the simmering tensions with their Cardassian neighbours. All the while, in the background, whispers began of the Dominion. Though this wasn't the first encounter with the Jem'Hadar, the battle in the Omarian Nebula was the first true indicator of just how dangerous the Dominion could be. Earlier engagements, though tragic, had been relatively small, 1 or 2 ships here or there. In this battle, both the Obsidian Order and the Tal Shiar are all but wiped out. These were no mere belligerents of the weak. Both agencies had been well established as ruthless and effective at what they did. Also, the Dederidex-class warbirds and Keldon-class warships had both been shown to be highly effective and destructive warships. Seeing so many of them destroyed by the overwhelming power of the Jem'Hadar in the Omarian Nebula was a stark indicator that things may not go our way. The Defiant only survived by cloaking and running like hell to get out of there. It was a grave day for the Alpha Quadrant, and no matter how one felt about the Cardassians or the Romulans, it was exactly as Admiral Todman described. It felt like Wolf 359 all over again. Number 3. Balance of Terror Redux. Star Trek Strange New Worlds benefits from its episodic nature combined with the modern budgets afforded to Star Trek. Simply put, this is some of the best looking Star Trek we've ever got. It balances its practical effects with some incredibly effective CGI, which gives this show a real world lived in feel. The finale of the first season, A Quality of Mercy, is a new take on an old tale. Balance of Terror is easily the best battle of the original series, 60s effects aside. The time-travelling shenanigans effectively put Pike in the big chair for the battle instead of Kirk, and it teases the audience with what it could look like to have not just two ships, but two fleets engage each other in this era. Spoiler alert, it looks good. In the grand scheme of things now, we're glad that this was a temporal anomaly, poor Spock, but it was pretty impressive seeing those Starfleet vessels go up against multiple Romulan birds of prey along with other Romulan ships of the era as well. It was also a reminder that, as experienced and good as Pike is, he was simply the wrong man for the job. It was a bold, honest statement for Strange New Worlds to make, and it was a perfect ending to the season. Number 2, the Battle of the Binary Stars. The Battle of the Binary Stars had a tall order to make. It, combined with the Vulcan Hello, had to introduce us to this new era of Star Trek, and, quite frankly, bring in a new audience as well. It also had to show the new look and feel of the franchise. Now, the efficacy of these episodes will probably be debated on the internet for time immemorial, but one thing that we can all agree on is it was a big start. The battle gave us 12 new Starfleet vessels, and equally as many, if not more, types of Klingon ships as well. It was a decisive victory for the Klingons, kick-starting the Federation-Klingon War and many, many conversations in the comment sections about this new dark take on Star Trek. The battle was intended to be a feast for the eyes, and for the most part, it was. A strong glow from nearby spatial phenomena actually made some of the action a little bit hard to see. Saying that, the carnage was on a scale rarely seen in Star Trek, as even our new hero ship, the Shenzhou, falls victim to the Klingons. But the heroes always survive, don't they? Welcome to Star Trek Discovery. Number 1, the battle in the Mutara Nebula. There were many, many comments after the first video going, excuse me, where was Star Trek II The Wrath of Khan? And our defense is simple. Gotta keep something for the sequel. Now, in our defense, I will say as well, we didn't expect we would take this long to do the second video, so you have my apologies for that. The naval-inspired battle between the Enterprise and the Reliant has gone down in Trek history as one of the tensest encounters ever put to screen. For the first time in years, it truly felt like the stakes were high. The Enterprise was easily matched by the Reliant, and of course Khan was a Superman genius. We'd also been told Spock was going to die. We were not confident. To be blunt, we were nervous. The use of three-dimensional tactics seems so obvious now, but for the longest time in Star Trek, this was quite radical. Because remember, we've been operating with a two-dimensional, frankly, television budget. This was glorious to see on the big screen. When the Enterprise ascends behind the Reliant, it is a truly remarkable moment, even if the cost was almost too high. If it's been a while since you've watched this film, I'd invite you to go back and watch it again. There's a reason it comes up so often as it does. It is one of the tensest, best paced, and well shot scenes in all of Star Trek, and it truly is one of the greatest standoffs in the franchise's history. That's everything for our list today, folks. There will probably be another list, so if your favorite did not make the first or second list, fear not. You have been awesome and wonderful. Please, thank you so much for everyone for subscribing. You are awesome, you are wonderful. Please make sure you're following us on the various socials. We're at TrekCulture. I'm at Sean Ferrick. You can just find me anywhere, really. You have been wonderful. I have been Sean. Live long and prosper. Thanks very much, and I'll see you soon.